The Redditor often perceives in his mind that the current secular consensus that exists in this world was as a result of educated men getting around a table and discussing ideas. And indeed, this has happened. This happened with Christianity when there was a conversion over to paganism. There were discussions when there was a transfer of power to the secular people from the Roman Catholics and the Protestants. In Europe, sure, there were discussions. However, to believe that this was simply a case of winning any particular argument, at least in the latter case, this is completely false. Because if we actually look at history, we don't see a case where there was a free market of ideas, where all of a sudden Voltaire came in and beat the Pope up. Nonsense, no. What we see is the French Revolution, where the French government that had overthrown the rightful king decided to eviscerate the Catholic Church within its borders by imposing the civil constitution of the clergy. We see the establishment of rival religions that don't really have any basis. We see the mass execution of nuns and priests by that same government. And we see this strand of anti-clericalism going throughout Europe and even across the sea to the Americas. In particular, the Cristero War that went on in Mexico at the beginning of the last century is a notable example of this. In other words, history is a lot bloodier and a lot less rational than the Reddit mindset likes to think. There was no mass winning of science. There was no mass winning of reason, and to be honest, I don't think that the modern world has really dealt with scholasticism as much as it would like to think. The ignorance of the Middle Ages is largely an historical hangover from Protestantism, the darkness of Romanism. But these things still exist. The ignorance of them only harms us. And so, therefore, rather than hiding inside of our Netflixes, rather than hiding inside of Michio Kaku and Stephen Hawking, what we ought to be doing is looking to the past. What we ought to be doing is rereading Aristotle. What we ought to be redoing is the scholastic period. We ought to be reconsidering these philosophers and taking them in the context that they were in and then comparing them to our modern ones. That we may be able to know the truth better. And therefore, I'd like to conclude this video as basically just an exhortation that really, you don't know everything, I don't know everything, we're all still learning, and in particular, there needs to be an overthrowal of these historical stereotypes about the Middle Ages. Because they really weren't that bad. They weren't hellish as people think. It wasn't as if there were peasants walking around and they were covered in mud. This is a nonsense historical view. They weren't perfect either. They certainly weren't the ages of great faith and which everyone had. No, of course not. There were very many evil people. But they were still times that deserve more respect. And I would encourage the Redditor to do more than just watch Hank Green talk about them. I'd encourage him to learn Latin and to read their own chronicles and to take them on their own merits. And likewise with any other historical period. Please subscribe to my Patreon if you like my content, as I've said repeatedly. Please share this video and please like it. Thank you very much for watching.